I'm Don Haas, the Director of Teacher Programming at the Paleontological Research Institution, and your host for Science in the Pub. We meet the second and fourth Thursday of the month unless holidays intervene, which they do for the next 2 months. And tonight's program is a panel of electric vehicle drivers, including myself. I'll be the moderator of the panel, but I have an electric Kia Niro that we'll be talking about in just a couple of minutes. 2 weeks from tonight, we'll have Adam Smith talking about billion-dollar disasters. Adam is a climatologist at NOAA who directs their billion-dollar disasters webpage. Then we're off for Thanksgiving, and then on December 8th, we'll have Dr. David Schiffman talking about shark science. And we do have much of the spring schedule set up and getting ready to go. The first session of the year will be our third annual session with Dr. David Margolius with a COVID update. David has switched jobs since we saw him last year. He is now the Director of Public Health for the City of Cleveland, but still boots on the ground for COVID. And let's get to tonight's program, which gets me back to sharing screen again with a slideshow. This one. And let's go into slideshow mode here. Give us just 1 second. Should have gone back to the beginning. So, welcome to How to Drive Electric. And our panelists tonight, I'm not sure if actually Rocky is here. Is Rocky here? We may not have Rocky. And as I said, I'm the moderator for tonight and also an EV driver. I have a Kia Niro that a fully electric Kia Niro. The Niro comes as a traditional internal combustion engine vehicle, a hybrid, and a fully electric vehicle. And that's what I have. Nate, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Nate Nelson. I live in San Francisco, and I drive. I have 2 different electric motorcycles. One is a Zero motorcycle, which is a U.S.-based company out of Scotts Valley, California, and then I have an Energica Eva, which is an Italian company based out of Modena, I think.
And we have Ramonia Younger, who's a Tesla driver.
Hi, Ramonia Younger. I'm from Amherst, New York, and currently I drive the Tesla Model S.
Okay, we can plug that in. What year is it, Ramonia?
2019.
Yes, and you said this is the 3rd Tesla you've owned, is that right?
Yes, currently it's my 3rd.
Yeah, awesome.
Wow.
And Karen, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Karen Holweg, and I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I've been driving my Nissan Leaf since 2018. And I think that's it.
Yeah.
Am I supposed to say something else? Okay.
Not yet. Yeah. Well, and I'm gonna spend just a few minutes talking about why to drive electric. And this is an excerpt from a larger talk, which at least a few of you have seen before, but people don't generally complain about seeing a few minutes of it a second time. And I've got a couple of slides here, and then I'll switch off to a different slideshow again. That's a chunk of graphite, 2 by 6 inch block of graphite. Graphite's pure carbon. I actually have the thing in the photograph in my hand, and the quarters on there to show you, to give you an idea of scale, but again, there it is in real life. And I want you to think about how it compares to the amount of carbon in gasoline. Is it a lot less than the amount of carbon in a gallon of gas, about the same, or a lot more than the amount of carbon in a gallon of gas? And for right now, you can just ponder that. We'll come back to that question, and I will put a link in the chat to the slideshow so you can get access to all of the links that we share tonight. And it's not that one, it's this one. It's not that one either. It is this one that we're going to look at. Already actually seen those slides, so we'll go to here. Go to slideshow mode. I'm going to shock you a little bit, scare you, and hopefully give you some motivation to act. We're going to talk a little bit about gasoline and why we should burn less of it. Right now in the US, we burn 369 million gallons of gas on the average day. That's more than a gallon per person per day. That should make you say, wow. I'm going to actually skip over these slides, but note that people don't have good understandings of the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion. And if we were live in person, I would put a Post-it note on one corner of the front wall of the room and with 0 on it, and on the other corner of the front wall, I'd put one with 1 trillion on it and ask you to come up and put a billion where you think it goes between 0 and a trillion, and a good chunk of the room would get it wrong. And that's a problem. I think everything goes in the first 1/1000th of the length of the line. When we talk about those named numbers, 1,000, million, billion, trillion, each one is 1,000 times bigger than the one before it. And we have a really, really hard time wrapping our heads around that because we're just not programmed for it. And so looking at a typical set of answers, that's what the average group will do. This is from an online session for Earth Day a year or two ago. But it always looks like that, just about always anyway. And again, all of the answers belong in that first 1/1000th of the length of the line. If the front wall of the room was 30 feet, then everything should go in the first 1/4 inch or so. And that is not what we do. And there's good reasons for that, but for the sake of time, we will skip by that and dig into just looking at the gasoline. And again, if we were in person, I would pass around a gallon jug that's 3/4 full of water because I don't want to pass around a jug of gasoline. And water has, or gasoline has a density 3/4 that of water, roughly. So if you fill up a jug, a gallon jug 3/4 full, that gives you a feel for that. I like to use concrete things to help people understand the physical quantities that we're talking about if we can. What that means is that if you burn 10 gallons of gas a week, there's 60 pounds that seemingly disappears from your gas tank. And we want to spend a few minutes thinking about where that goes. We know, hopefully remember some of our middle school science, that matter can neither be created nor destroyed, only changed in form. So it doesn't actually disappear. It becomes something else. And in order to figure out that process, it's really helpful to know what gasoline is to start with, which is actually kind of complex. It is not the same geographically, it changes seasonally, but it's basically a complex mixture of hydrocarbons. And hydrocarbons are chemical compounds made out of hydrogen and carbon, unsurprising based on their name, hydrocarbon. The average chemical formula of gasoline is something like C8H18, which some of you may recognize as octane, which is labeled on gas pumps. And what do you get when you burn octane? Well, you get carbon dioxide and water, of course, and energy, which is why you do it. Looking at this in cartoon form, there's an octane molecule and some oxygen diatoms or oxygen molecules. and the chemical formula up at the top. And we're going to give this a spark and recombine those things in the combustion reaction. And now we've got 8 carbon dioxide molecules and 9 water molecules. And there's our carbon dioxide molecules. And there's our water molecules. And when we look at the 8 CO2 molecules that came from burning that 1 octane molecule, we can see it weighs a bunch more. And that's not magic. It's chemistry. And there's a little bit of the chemistry. It's heavier than the gasoline we started with because we took oxygen out of the air, and it's not just the gasoline that we're looking at. So when you burn 6 pounds, a 6-pound gallon of gasoline, you end up with 19 pounds of CO2 for every single one of those 369 millions of gasoline that we're burning every day. And that should make you say, wow, and maybe take a sip of your beer. And if we want to picture that going beyond just knowing how much it weighs, we now have to think about how to think about an invisible gas. And so again, if we were live in person and we weren't worried about COVID, I just opted not to do this at an in-person workshop because I'm worried about COVID. I'd pass around balloons and get you to think about gallon-sized balloons and how many gallon-sized balloons it would take to hold 19 pounds of CO2. So use your imagination to picture that balloon in your hand. Visualize yourself holding it empty. It weighs something. Think about how much it weighs, and I'm going to fill it up to about a gallon sized. So when I look at this compared to that, that's about right. So now we want to think about how many balloons of this size would it take to hold 19 pounds of carbon dioxide. So it doesn't weigh very much. It actually sort of feels lighter than it did before because it's less dense. And so what we're actually thinking about is the stuff inside the balloon. And to think about that, it's helpful to think about some things that weigh about 19 pounds. That might be a large cat. Like, Daphne, you want to say hello? Daphne doesn't want to say hello, but the larger of my 2 cats is close to 19 pounds. A small dog, a 1-year-old child might be 19 pounds. And if you think about a 20-pound bag of anything like charcoal or rice or whatever, that gives you a sense of that amount of weight. So anybody want to stick in the chat how many gallon-sized balloons it takes to hold 19 pounds of carbon dioxide? And again, subtract the weight of the balloon itself and just think about what's in there. So you want to stick some answers into the chat? Don't be shy. You're being shy. For the sake of time, I'll spill the beans. It's about 1,100. So depending on how many people we have, you can do the math to figure out what that is. Last time I did this presentation with a classroom full of folks, there were a dozen people. So each one would have to blow up 92 balloons to get us to 1,100. We can animate that. There's 100 balloons falling down. So do that 10 more times. There's 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000, and 1,100 from 1 gallon of gas. And that again weighs about 19 pounds. And holy cow, that should make you say, wow. And we again burn 369 million gallons a day, so over 7 billion pounds of CO2 every year, or every day rather, just from burning gasoline. Liquid transportation fuels are somewhere around a quarter of the emissions in the US. And holy cow, so you got to multiply that by 4 to scale it up to all of our emissions. And now we'll very quickly go back to our block of graphite and step through this speedily quick. You can see me take more time with this in a video and a link I'll share. So a gallon of gasoline is about 87% carbon by weight. So that means there's 5.5 pounds of carbon in each gallon of gas. And again, pure graphite is pure carbon, main ingredient in pencil lead. So everybody's handled this stuff in their lives. And the quarter again is intended to show scale. And the block isn't big enough. I made a mistake when I ordered it. I meant to order a 6 by 6 by 2 inch block, and I ordered a 6 by 2 by 2 inch block. Oops. So what that means is this is 1/3 of the amount of carbon in a gallon of gas. So for every gallon of gas you burn, 3 times this much carbon is going out your tailpipe and into the atmosphere. And if you think that doing that 369 million times a day isn't changing the way the atmosphere works, I got news for you. You are incorrect. What do we do to deal with that? Well, the first and most important answer is don't put it in the atmosphere in the first place. And that's most of what we're going to talk about tonight, is doing something that makes it so we're not putting so much into the air. But if it does go into the air, the technologically simplest thing to do to take it back out is to grow a tree. Wood is about half carbon by weight. So if you want to take 5.5 pounds of carbon out of the air by growing trees, and wood's about half carbon by weight, that means 11 pounds of wood needs to be grown to sequester each gallon of gasoline we burn. And guess what? We're not doing that. And again, you should say, wow, I'm almost done with this piece. And we can't let that wood burn or decay if we want to stop the damage that it does. So how much is 11 pounds of wood? Well, it just so happens that a standard 8-foot 2x4 weighs about 11 pounds. So next time you fill up your tank of gas, if you're not one of our EV drivers on here, then as the gallons tick by, think 2x4, 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 2x4 for each gallon as it goes by. It's hard to get the whole thing in one shot there, but here's my 8-foot 2x4. And like I said, we are not doing that. And what can we do instead? Well, let's talk about driving an EV and what difference that makes. It is not the ultimate solution. I think that's really important to address. But it is less bad than internal combustion vehicle. So I'm going to do a few essentials, hit on a few essentials, and then bring in our panelists and have them share some of their experiences. First off, range is going to vary with driving conditions. It doesn't do nearly as well when it's cold. So my car in perfect conditions has a 260-mile range, and perfect conditions means that it's pretty warm, but not so warm that you need to run the air conditioning. And in that setting, I can get 260 miles on a charge. In the winter, it'll drop to 200 miles. And it would probably be less if I didn't have a garage to protect it from the elements. Like most Americans, I drive less in the winter, and we'll say a word or two about that too. Most of us charge at home, and a good question to think about when you think about inconveniences that might come from having an EV is, how much time do you spend at a gas station in a month. I spend zero. And I think if I don't know if our EV drivers have second vehicles or what, but if they only have an EV, they don't go to gas stations either. EVs are great, but imperfect, and they do require more planning for longer trips. And I'll say more about that in a little bit too. Today is the worst day. Unless we have societal collapse, today is the worst day the infrastructure will be for the foreseeable future. It is getting better every single day. Our electric bills have gone up as our paying for gasoline has dropped to zero. The drop in gasoline costs is quite a bit larger than the increase in electric bills. And I think for EV drivers who are at least getting away from home, apps are essential for doing longer trips. And we'll take a look at that next. There are my EV apps on my phone. PlugShare is what I rely on most. I think our Tesla driver will probably have a different answer than PlugShare, but if you're driving something besides a Tesla, I think PlugShare is probably where you want to go, and we'll look at that in just a minute. I'll share my phone screen in a minute or two. Most of the other apps in my folders there are for different charging networks. You can see Shell Recharge is owned by Shell. Electrify America is one of the bigger networks, maybe the biggest network. I vacationed in Canada this summer. I live 15 miles from the Niagara River, so I go into Canada occasionally, so I have some Canadian apps as well. And I'm guessing I have more EV apps than anybody else on the panel because of the Canadian aspect. And I'm going to stop sharing and start sharing on my phone. But while I'm doing that switch, take any questions so far. There is my phone. And that is looking at PlugShare, a little bit ahead of myself. So there is my first page of apps. ChargePoint, EV Connect, Blink, EVgo, Shell Recharge, Electrify America, Samsung Connect, EV Smart, Charge Up 4, Petro Canada, and Ivy are all different charging networks, sort of different brands of where you can get your electricity. And about half of those are Canadian. The Kia Access is from Kia, and it allows me to see what's going on with my car. And I should have opened it up before, and it says 0%, but that's not correct. So and click there. It's unlocked because it's in my garage. I've got 20,000 miles on it. I got it in May of 2021. And it is updating the vehicle information. So while we're waiting for that to update, we'll take a look at PlugShare. And I'm going to cancel that trip and look at the homepage. There's where I am. You can see if we zoom out a little bit, which I just pinch and squeeze just like you do on other map apps, you can see there are charging stations all around me, and these serve Ramonia and I, except for, of course, we don't need to charge outside of our homes in Western New York. For the most part, we charge in our garage, but we need this when we're on the road. There's a filter, so you can look for different kinds of chargers. So I've got the CCS and the J1772 ones shown on there. The CCS ones are the fast ones, and those are the ones you really want to pay attention to when you're on the road. And you can click on any one of those stations and get some info about it. So many Walmart supercenters have high-speed chargers, and when I'm on the road, I'm relatively likely to hit a Walmart because they've got the fast chargers there. Those are, I think all of the Walmart ones are part of the Electrify America network. So I can actually now go over to the Electrify America app and open that up. And I can see if there's anybody at a charger and probably get a report if it's down. Oops, I had it there. I scared it away. So I click on, try and click on that Walmart, that Super Walmart on Cheektowaga, and it says 2 out of the 4 chargers are available, and you can see the chargers there at station 1. They're both available. At station 2, they're unavailable, and that means they're either broken or in use. And there are actually more chargers there, and you can see which ones are available and which ones are not available. So,
and Don, for your car, about how long does it take for you to charge up at a fast charger?
At a fast charger, I'll go from 20% to 80% in about 40 minutes. And it slows down after 80% for various physics reasons. But I'll get a pretty good charge in about 40 minutes. And, a 250-mile range, I personally do not have the biological capacity to drive 250 miles without stopping. So I stop somewhere that's got both a bathroom and a fast charger.
Right.
And if I'm hitting a bathroom, just a bathroom, then I may stop for just 10 or 15 minutes to do that, and then get that little bit of in 15 minutes. I'll probably get something like 70 miles of added range, something like that. So if I stop a couple of times for a bio break, then on a long trip, then I may not need to make a longer stop, but I usually do. Typically I find a fast charger that's near a restaurant. And stuff like that. And let's see if there's other stuff I want to look at in here, see if my request timed out on my, oh, but it actually did it. So I have right now I have 239 miles of range, and I'm 94% charged on my car. And fellow panelists, are there other apps that I should show folks? Do you?
The only one that I've used is Charge Point. Other than that, I go to the Tesla dealer chargers nearby.
Yeah, and so the Build a Better Route app, you can turn on and turn off what kinds of stations you see. So Teslas do have a different charger than anybody else, but they have a very good network as I understand it.
Yeah.
And
out here, I haven't used anything but Charge Point. So Don, tell me functionally how you use all these different
good
sources.
So all of them, well, the PlugShare and the ABRP, which I believe stands for a better route planner. Those two show you everybody's chargers. The other ones are all brands. So Electrify America is, I think, maybe the biggest network of chargers around the country. Shell Recharge is a pretty common one in parts of New York State. and EVgo. Those are all essentially, and Charge Point is either Charge Point or Electrify America, I think are the biggest in the area. So
can I ask a quick question?
sure.
So I wanted to make sure. So Tesla's plug is a proprietary thing,
Yes.
but the other EVs tend to share a common.
Yep.
It's like the difference between needing an iPhone charger and a Android charger.
Yeah, pretty much. And let me actually go back to the PlugShare app to look at my filters, because my filters actually include sort of a diagram of what the two chargers I can use look like. So if my charger, which I should have taken a picture of, can take either the CCS or the J1772, and the CCS has two connectors and the J1772 has just one. So the top circle in the CCS diagram there is the same thing as the J1772. And the CCS has those two connectors, making it a much faster charge than the J1772. So when you're on the road, if you're just making a quick stop, you're really looking for the fast charger, the top one there. Hotels often have the J1772, which will charge it overnight, which is great at the end of the day or whatever. But when you're on the road and just making a quick stop, for me anyway, I'm pretty much always looking for that fast charger. Ramonia?
I was going to say that the first Tesla came with adapters so that I could use a variety of chargers around. After that, though, it did not come with it. When the question was asked, why can't we just have a universal charging? Of course, Monopoly's not going to let that happen.
Right.
But that's such a disadvantage, especially with the move for us to go to EVs.
Yep. Hard agree.
Yeah. I just for perspective, I am fascinated by your story, Don, because I'm out here in Colorado, and we have Charge Point. I have never heard of these other things that you're describing. And when I bought my Nissan Leaf 4 years ago, I got a little charge card with it that's for Charge Point, and it's registered just like a regular Visa charge card to my name. And I add money to it, and I just swipe that card on any charger I run into, whether it's a fast charger or a slow charger. They also take Charge Point out here.
Yep.
And the interesting thing about Tesla out here in the West, I tried to figure out whether I could get down to a conference in Tucson, Arizona from Colorado. And I could if I was running a Tesla, but I can't with regular Charge Point with my Nissan Leaf or any other electric car because the chargers are spaced too far apart.
That's interesting.
Now, as you're saying, in a year or two, I expect to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you should download the PlugShare app. But it does look like you're telling me the truth. I'm searching around Boulder.
Oh, thank you.
All Charge Point. Looks like every last one of them's a Charge Point, which is interesting.
What's it like out in San Francisco, Nate?
It's a constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. I mean, I think it's not really that hard for us to find, either DC fast chargers or AC chargers, pretty much anywhere around here. Just mainly because our population is
a dense population.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right now we're just looking at really pretty much a few blocks. I don't know, maybe that's a half mile across or something like that. And you can see how many chargers there are, including quite a number of fast chargers. But unlike Boulder, they are not all Charge Point.
But the interesting thing is every time I plug in at a public place, somebody walking by will say, "How do you do that?"
Yeah.
What happens?
Yeah.
So people are really curious about
Yes, they sure are.
what this different form of gas station is like.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
Funny
That's right.
because while you're all looking, I put plug share in on my iPad and I'm on Long Island and there's only 2 that come up and they're way, way out in the East End. I know that locally to me, and I'm mid Suffolk County, they just put in a Tesla one at one of our local shopping centers. But looking at the plug share, it's Long Island is fairly unfriendly for it.
That's
I guess that purchase is going to be a Tesla then.
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm
Gonna have some marketing going on here.
I mean, thankfully, when you're
now
driving
we're-
around a city like
yeah.
that, you don't have as far to go, and your range
Right.
is also, on the high side because you're not using a lot of energy at high speeds. So, you could drive around the city all week, and I could drive around the city all week in my Tesla and not have to charge,
Right.
more than like once every 10 days or something like that.
I did want to address the question in the chat, which is about charge stations that are non-functioning. And that does happen from time
oh
to time.
yes,
For
oh,
sure.
Every charger has on it a phone number so that while you're standing there plugging yours in, if you want to phone the number and say, hey, this plug next to me is not working, just thought you'd want to know. And the charge point people are very happy to get those kinds of phone calls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And sometimes they're able to like reset the chargers
Yes.
like while you're standing there.
While you're
for
there.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
another nice thing about the plug share app is like you can report that stuff as well. So
Mhm.
it lets other people know like, hey, having an issue. I wasn't able to charge, or it was only at, so much power or whatever.
And it's really good to report it as well because of vandalism as well. Oftentimes it's not in a congested area or anything, but nonetheless, once in a while you'll have individuals like that. They may not hang the charging unit back up. It might get wet or in a snowbank in Buffalo area. So by all means, keep reporting them.
Yeah, and there are plenty of chargers on Long Island. I'm not sure what you're running into there, Lisa.
No, it took me a few. It wasn't coming up at first, and then it started coming up more and more and more. Actually, the one that's kind of highlighted on your screen, the one in Oakdale, is only about 5 minutes from me.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I see a lot more Tesla stations going up around me.
Yeah, well, none of these that we're looking at right now are Tesla stations.
Yeah.
All of the orange ones are high speed. So there's no shortage of charging stations on Long Island.
How long does it take you to charge your car?
For me, it takes about 40 minutes to go from 20% to 80%.
If it's on a fast charger.
If it's on a fast charger, yes. Yeah, so so let me put the link to the slideshow into the chat so folks can access.
And like Nate said, I just charge my car once every week or two,
Yeah.
but it depends on how much you drive.
Right, absolutely. So here is the link to the presentation. Let's put it just to the waiting people. And I have not read the stuff in the chat, so if there's something that I should address, let me know. And let's now we'll go on to hear from the panelists. I think are the next slides. Whoops, that's I hit the button. Oh, and just 3 bullets here. We need to switch it's really important to recognize that this is not the ultimate solution. We need to switch our attention from making cars more efficient to making a transportation system that's more efficient than cars. And it's important to recognize stuff like a wind farm is not a modified coal-fired power plant. What we need is something different from individual cars to make the kinds of changes in emissions we need to make. And that sounds daunting, But if you imagine that we make the same scale of changes in the transportation system in the next 25 years as the communication system has changed in the last 25 years, it's doable. I believe it's doable. And if you also think about 100 years ago, changing the changes in the transportation system between 1922 and 1947, 25 years, the remarkable changes in the system was where there were still quite a few people getting around with horses in 1922, and coal was the leading transportation fuel for ships and trains in 1922. That was very, very different in 1947, and I think we can make those changes. So I've already said a little bit about my my Niro. That's what it looks like. My range in the summer is about 250 miles. In the winter, it's about 200 miles. I can share good stories and bad stories about it, but I'm going to hand off to Karen next to talk about her Nissan Leaf, and she has had her car since 2018, so she's got some good experience. You want to take it away, Karen?
Sure. The most different thing about an EV, I used to drive a Toyota. My last car was a Toyota Corolla, which I drove for 28 years. So it was very hard for me to leave my Toyota Corolla. But I took the jump 4 years ago, and the two biggest difference about my Nissan Leaf is the configuration of the front end of the car. So the left hand and the right hand bumper are further away than the front of my Toyota Corolla was. So I banged up those corners a little bit. And the second biggest difference is the weight of the car. You have to understand that there's a battery in there, and it's a huge, hulking, heavy battery. That doesn't make much difference except for two things. When I drive from Boulder to Denver on our turnpike, there's a big hill that goes from the Boulder Valley up to the level to get on out to Denver. And that hill in the wintertime is covered with snow and ice. And generally there's a slowdown in traffic as people try to get up the hill. With all the weight on my tires, my Nissan Leaf just powers right up that hill. Because there's good traction on the tires and there's a lot of weight on top of the tires. Think sandbags in the back of a pickup truck or something like that. And so it drives really well on the snow and ice. However, last night was our first snow. So this morning when I went out to get in my Nissan Leaf and drove to get to my errands, the dashboard was flashing on tire pressure low because all of a sudden we were at freezing and the tires didn't have enough air in them because the weight, makes that tire pressure change more than it would in a normal car. So, and that leads me to one other difference, which is when I'm at a stop sign and I hit the gas, hit the accelerator when the light turns green, I am just amazed at how fast my Leaf hops off the mark and starts running down the road. Yeah. The acceleration is like a jackrabbit start in a gasoline car. Yep. And people who ride with me in my car who have a normal gasoline car always say, wow, this is so quiet and you're going so fast. And so you have to think of the car being powered by a light switch. It's just, you switch it on and it goes. There's nothing in between. It's either go or stop. And the other fun thing about driving it is when I drive up into the mountains, I lose a lot of charge as I'm going up 3,000, 4,000 feet in elevation. But even if I'm at zero when I get to the trailhead at the top of the mountain, it doesn't bother me at all because I know when my car comes down the mountain back into town, it's going to gain mileage because it's coming downhill.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So-
an electric motor run backwards is a generator. And that's
Right.
what's going on when you're going up and down hill and it's really fun to watch your mileage, your range increase as you're heading downhill.
A friend who was with me going up to the mountains recently said, how much, look at your odometer. How much do you have left? And I said, not much. And she said, so don't we need to charge it somewhere before we go down? And I said, no, watch it as we go down.
Mhm.
And so that's a really interesting difference in my mind. My car, because it's 4 years old, only has a range of 150 miles, which is plenty to get anywhere in the Denver metro area and back. It's also enough with an intermediate charge to get to any natural area in the vicinity here that I want to get to, either out on the prairies or up in the mountains. But I have recently heard of a lot of EVs that have a 300 to 400 mile range. And if I were buying an EV right now, I'd snap up one of those. My strategy when I bought it, knowing that it only had a 150 mile range, was, well, I'm saving so much money by buying this EV with all the subsidies that it had at the time, that I'm not going to worry about it because I'm just going to rent a car when I want to go on a road trip. Well, that was fine until the pandemic came and I couldn't rent a car anywhere for any amount of money.
Yeah, and I'll note that I live in Buffalo, just outside of Buffalo, and I have taken my my EV to Vermont twice, Washington D.C., Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and certainly some places I'm forgetting, and I'm going to Virginia next month, and it does add time to the trip, sort of. But if you just plan your meals around where you need to stop and charge, it really doesn't add any time.
Yeah.
So you can.
And I can stop for a half hour at a fast charger,
Yeah.
grab a bite to eat, and be ready to go again, fully charged. But given the distances out here in the West, I can't do the kind of traveling Don does with my car.
Yeah.
And now that rental cars are becoming available again, I can.
Yeah, and I think Ramonia will be able to speak to the longer range vehicles, because Tesla's got good range.
Yeah, I want to hear why she has 3 Teslas in 2 years.
We'll hear from her in a minute, but let's go to Nate now.
Yeah, sure. So I actually have 2 electric motorcycles. The first one that I bought it in 2016, new. It's the orange one there, and it's a 0DS, which is Zero is, most people aren't familiar with. It's an American motorcycle manufacturer that's based out of Scotts Valley in California here, and they've been around since about 2010. Their current range of products is maybe even pretty substantially better than what I have. But for example, the bike that I have has only around a 60 to 80 mile range at freeway speeds, and I think that the newest, latest and greatest bike is more like 100 to 120 miles range at freeway speeds. And I specifically put a range there because, as Dawn and others mentioned, Karen mentioned that there are a lot of significant factors that affect your range. Whether you're going up a hill, how fast you're going, and things you don't think about, like air, whether or not there's a headwind or temperature, to exterior temperature. But and it's particularly winds are particularly troublesome with an electric motorcycle, because the aerodynamics on any motorcycle are really terrible. Even the fancy sport bikes with the smooth looking bodies where you tuck down, even those have really terrible aerodynamics. And if you know a little bit about physics, that the amount of power required to from point A to point B at a certain velocity is dependent on it's actually dependent on the square of the velocity. So it's not just a linear thing, like I go 10 miles or 10% faster and I use 10% more energy. No, it's more like 20 more than 20% more energy. And that counts for like when you have a headwind. So, you know, if there's a 15-mile-an-hour headwind and you're doing 60 miles an hour, your range just went down by a lot. You guys may think, you know, how do you deal with 60, 80 miles of range? Well, I mean, for me, these bikes are commuter bikes, and I ride in the range of, my commute varies because there are different offices that I have to go to in a given day, but like one-way commute is 40 to 70 miles. And you know, I live in San Francisco and the traffic is bad, so I'm very rarely actually doing freeway speeds. So, and you know, the bikes probably have 100 to 120 mile range at, you know, 50 miles an hour or 60 miles an hour.
And
So
how long does it take to charge a bike?
yeah, so the two bikes are pretty different. The Zero has its fast charging mode is an AC charging mode, so you use only the J1772s, and it's capable of 6 kilowatts. So, and it's got a 14-ish kilowatt hour battery, so it takes about 2 hours from 0 to 100, or you know, you try to avoid getting down that low. So, you know, 80% charge you can get to about 80% charge in like an hour and a half or something like that. The Energica is DC fast charge capable. And it's got a rate of around 20 kilowatts. So, and the battery is, you know, about 13 kilowatts. So I can 20 to 80% charge that bike in about 20 minutes. Or full charge in around, you know, 40 minutes, something like that.
And there are a couple of motorcycle specific questions in the chat.
Let me,
So
I just saw one pop up.
How does their performance compare to gasoline motorcycles? And,
I mean, it really depends on what you're buying. Like my bike is probably equivalent to, my Zero is probably equivalent in power to like a 600cc. I won't call it a sport bike, but similar to that. And the other bike, the Energica, which is a fancy kind of sporty Italian bike, is So the KLR, I see a KLR 650 pointed out there. It's definitely, my Zero has more power than that. It'll even though it's not the super sporty model, it'll pull away from a KLR no problem. It's a pretty quick bike. The Eva is a really quick bike, and it has I think the new versions of the Energica have like 170 horsepower, which for a motorcycle is a lot. They're as fast as probably not quite as fast as the newest Model S Plaid edition, but almost as fast.
And is your plug for these motorcycles the same as for our cars?
So my Zero has just the AC charging. So I don't know if you're familiar. You know what the CCS charger looks like. It has the top part and then a bottom part, and the J port only has the top part, or the 1772. I can use conventional chargers, either AC or DC on my Energica, or only AC on my Zero. But I can also just plug them into the wall and charge on 120, which is what I mostly do at home. And in that case, it takes like 8 hours to charge one, because you know it's not a very fast rate. And I'm sure if you guys know, with the bigger batteries, you try to plug it into 110, you're like there for 4 or 5 days on a bigger battery.
And if I'm just charging on household current, which is what I usually do, it's like 40 hours or something like that. And it's, you know, people go, well, that's horrible. And I'm like, well, I virtually never go 250 miles 2 days in a row from my garage.
But also, totally. So you get 20 or 30 miles overnight, 40 miles overnight, and that's all you need to like maintain keep your battery at a 80 or 90% level or whatever. I see a question about touring on the motorcycles, and I can tell you that both Zero and Energica make touring capable bikes now. And in fact, in the past summer, there are a couple of guys that one had a Zero and one had an Energica, and they were trading back and forth between the cross-country world record for electric motorcycles over the summer. They traded, the record changed hands 3 or 4 times. It's not quite as fast. It takes, I think the current record is around 75 hours from somewhere in Florida to somewhere in San Diego, which is like, I don't know,
that's
1,500 miles or something like that, or maybe 1,800 miles. So you can do it. It takes 3 or 4 days. They're very capable of doing it, but they're, that's a tough ride. That's like, you just, like the only time you're sleeping when you do something like that is when you're charging. So like you ride for an hour and a half, you charge for an hour, you ride for an hour and a half, you charge for an hour. Like it's just over and over and over again, very relentless. And it's tough on your body to do it that fast, but definitely capable. And I know lots of people that have done really long, for example, there was the Ewan McGregor documentary about him and his friend that did the long way up. They went from the tip of South America to LA in, I don't know, 5 months or something like that on electric Harleys. So it's definitely doable, and it just requires a different mindset, right? Like, you're there for the experience and seeing stuff, and it's fine. It's fine if you spend a couple hours someplace charging, just so you can go and visit the people, or, have a good meal, or, see some exciting touristy kinds of stuff. So definitely
that brings up the question of do you just leave your vehicle plugged in? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
I don't know that anybody's experienced anything being stolen when it's left at a charger.
No,
I haven't heard of anything.
No, I haven't heard anything. And I put in the wrong model for Ramonians, but I actually guessed on the Model S for Rocky. So Ramonia, you want to share your experience?
So my range is about 358. Typically, I just use it on good days. I have high performance tires. That's the reason for that in particular. So if it's no snow, then I'll take it out. It's no problem. Typically, I'll charge it at the charging stations because my promotional package allows that for no additional cost. At the time, they've since stopped that incentive program. But at home, it's like dial up or high speed internet. For a full charge, I would say 0 to 100. It would probably take me about 30 hours as well. But I do it like anything else. If you got the air conditioning on or the heat, you're burning more fuel. But one of the things that I really enjoy about it a lot after learning how to drive it was the braking system. So you're braking slower, and it's rated that on average for the lifetime of the car, you may not even have to ever replace your brakes. So that works very well. And it's just a good way to drive almost anyways, because you're stopping slower. Other than poor customer service of late, Tesla is still very good. And of course, a lot of vehicles, they try to pattern themselves after it. So the range is going to continue to increase. I believe now that the 2023, the range will be the 358. Mine's is 340 currently. But the Plaid is less than the high performance, the ludicrous model. But it's good.
Yeah, and I know.
And tell us what led you to get 3 different ones. What triggered that change each time?
Basically, it was for the fuel, the savings, and it was a savings. I came from a Lexus 460, and even though that was like 12 years ago, but the gas prices were still sort of funny, and even on the premium, it was $100 for a fill up. So I calculated the cost. And to be honest with you, the 3 vehicles that I've had, my maintenance on it has been zero.
Yeah.
Has been zero. There was an issue with the wiper, and that's the only thing that I have right now that I'm questioning, but it hasn't cost anything at all.
Yeah, same. 20,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
Haven't done anything, and I'm a little surprised we haven't mentioned yet that we don't need to do oil changes.
Yeah, no oil. And for the inspections, at first it was, they looked at the car and they're like, I guess it's good. Now they do a safety inspection, to delay you, et cetera, but it's been good.
And I've got a few questions that, that.
Let me just address one of the questions that was in the chat, which has to do with, does the range go down with age? Over the 4 years that I've had my Leaf, I remember it being something like 170 miles in the beginning, and it doesn't go above 160 now if I fully charge it. So it has gone down a little bit, but it varies that much from summer to winter. So you just have to figure it out.
Yeah. And I actually, my ex-wife and I actually had one of the first Priuses in the US. We had a 2001, I think, Prius back in, bought in the fall of 2000. And we had that car for 10 years, and the battery did not, there was no noticeable change over the 10 years. I've had mine now for 18 months or something like that. And so far, no change, but I do expect it'll decay over time to some degree.
And the maintenance, like Don said, is almost nothing. Leaf requires you to go in periodically. I think it's every 6 months or so. And all they really want to do is check and rotate your tires, again, because of the weight that the tires are bearing. Yeah. And I did have a flat tire once in the 4 years, and then you have to get towed to the dealer to get the new tire put on. It's not something that AAA will change, at least not out here in the West.
Oh, that's interesting. And I have learned that AAA now has portable charging in some locations. I know that's available in upstate New York.
Yeah.
I assume it's like a giant capacitor or something that they that they bring out, but I don't actually know the details, but I know they have it.
Some of them have diesel generators.
Probably. Could well be.
And there's no noise in my Leaf. The only time you can hear the Leaf is when it backs up, like a truck has a beep, 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 beep. When you back up, the Leaf has a little high-pitched whine. Yeah,
and I should note too that a lot of the people on the call tonight are New York State science teachers, and I am pretty sure I'm driving to Syracuse for Stannis in a couple of weeks, though I might actually take the train in interest of getting away from moving to a system that's better than cars for transportation. But I will, because I have to bring a bunch of stuff, I will probably actually end up driving. So if you want to see it live in person,
you could use it as a fundraiser and give rides.
Yeah, sure. So any of the other panelists want to chime in on any of the questions there or anything else?
In my mind, the only thing that I'd change and the only advantage to getting rid of my car would be to get something with a 300 or 400 mile range.
Yeah, and I'll note this, my last car was the first car I ever leased, which was a Kia Forte that I leased on a 2-year lease, because at the time I got it, I didn't feel like I could afford an EV, but knew that I wanted one soonish. So I did a 2-year lease a Kia Forte, and I am leasing again for a couple of reasons. One, this time I've got a 3-year lease, and I'm hopeful that by the end of the lease, that either there will be great new options available, or I'll just buy out the lease. And right now I'm thinking I'm probably just going to buy out the lease, which ends up being very close to the same as if I had bought it up front. And I think with the high demand for vehicles right now, that's going to be the thing that economically makes sense, but we'll see. And I'm also leasing in part, trying to shift my thinking to see transportation as being more like a utility than a personal piece of property. And what I want to do is get from point A to point B in comfort. And I mentioned that I'm driving down to Virginia next month. And as a big guy and a climate change educator, I hate flying. And I am so much more comfortable in the car, even if it takes a lot longer. But I am also so much more comfortable on a train, and I just wish our train system was better than it is. I will also, there was a question in the chat about having to wait for a charger. I have almost never had to wait for a working charger, but I have been frustrated by broken chargers. The worst experience was in June. I was in the DC area and I stopped at, I believe, 6 broken chargers before I found a working one, which was incredibly frustrating. Because I was, I didn't have all that much range left when I hit the first one of those 6. And by the time I hit the last one of those 6, I was just about out of juice. Some of the time you can actually call the customer service number and they can get the charger working remotely. I've had that experience with Electrify America more than once. And I don't believe I've ever stopped at an Electrify America charger that didn't eventually work for me. And almost always you plug it in and it works. I've had more variable success on other charging networks.
My experience with Electrify America has been really good too. And sometimes when they like have like charge your card or charge your, like when the issue is not related to the function of the charger, but issue with charging your credit card or whatever, your app, they will give you a free charge. Yeah. I've had several free charges from Electrify America just because they had billing issues.
Yeah, and sometimes the most frequent charger, I telecommute from Buffalo to Ithaca, and the most frequent charger that I stop at outside of my garage is at the Waterloo Premium Outlets on between here and Ithaca, one bladder full away from here. And so that's the most common place I stop, and it's an Electrify America, and it's not unusual for them to give free sessions, which I assume happens there because they want me to shop longer. And but I don't really know, but it's maybe a quarter of the time when I stop there, I get a free charge. I'm like, cool. And I honestly don't buy very much there. But
my municipality, and I know a couple of other municipalities around here, are allowing use of their chargers at, for instance, rec centers is the primary place the city has installed chargers, are free. And they're charging nothing right now for the last year or so. And I think that's just an encouragement, and maybe from some of the federal dollars that are available to pay that amount. And
So, Dawn,
normally at a charger, if I do have to pay, this was in response to a question. for my 150-mile range Leaf, it normally costs me around $4 to charge.
Yeah, it's like 20 to 40 cents a kilowatt hour. So it depends on how much you're filling up and how big your battery is. But you know, if you had your battery's probably what, like 50 kilowatt hours or something like that. Maybe not. Maybe it's only 40 kilowatt hours. So, you know, $16 max from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
The
I have
full
never
charge at
paid-
home for me would be $11.
There you go.
Yeah, I have never paid $20 to charge to get to.
No, I haven't paid more than 5 or 6.
Yeah, I've probably the most I've ever paid is about 15.
Do you guys have the monthly subscriptions for whatever ones you use most?
They automatically fill up my charge card when it's
Yeah.
empty.
Same.
So for me, for Electrify America, they charge 43 cents a kilowatt hour. I don't use it very much, so I don't pay a monthly subscription fee. But if I paid $5 a month, the rate is half as much.
Yeah.
So if you
So-
charge a lot, it makes sense to pay the monthly subscription fee.
So it's almost kind of like your Easy Pass when your credit level gets to a
Yep.
certain point, they fill you back up with a set amount on your account.
Yep.
Yep.
That's right. Whatever you've agreed to.
Right. Okay. All very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Because I
and-
mean, one of the big things that's held us back and why we went with the hybrid is at home we can't really plug in at our house because unfortunately, you know, things are that we can't plug in because everything will blow. But and it's not our house, we rent, so I can't fix that problem. But it's very interesting because that was one of our big things about again, besides not charging at the house, you know, we like to go on road trips and charging and stopping and the length of time, you know, my bladder holds more than yours does though. Just saying.
Man,
I
good
could-
for you.
My family also has a Model 3 and we do a fair amount of road tripping, and the Tesla is really superb road trip car. Like we've gone from here to Michigan a half dozen times and
That's
it's super pleasant.
And Tesla nationally has put in a network of chargers that it is
Yeah.
to die for.
yeah.
There's a whole big brand new, like I said earlier, big brand new charging Tesla station right by us. They put it at the back end of the parking lot, but okay.
And my understanding is that all vehicles right now, EVs included, have long wait times to order them and get them.
Like hybrids when they first came out.
I think that's all vehicles period right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 'cause they all have supply
Yeah.
chain issues with chips.
And they do have that tax incentive for 2023,
Mhm.
7,500 up to.
Yep.
And I understand it's if it doesn't cost over 80,000.
And I know Danelle's got a question that she wants to ask because she sent me a direct message. And Danelle, you want to go ahead and ask?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm assuming most of you are like me and might be the nerdiest person most of your friends know, or you're obviously EV riders and drivers. And I've been getting lots of questions recently about like, you know, how concerned are you about electric cars, and especially this like dependence on electricity. Like, are you concerned that then there'll be some issues with like being able to charge at some point? And I'm just curious how you're answering those concerns from folks that are in your networks, or if you're getting them, I guess.
Yeah, well,
I'm not sure I understand the question. What's the concern?
Some people feel more comfortable driving gasoline cars because they feel like they're going to have access to the energy source easier than they will lots of electricity that they will need to charge their cars.
Oh, my feeling is just the opposite. It's going to get easier and easier and easier to charge an electric car.
yeah, I agree. It's getting easier every day. And my Wegmans just added chargers, and I'm hopeful that that's going to be chain wide because I'd rather stop at a Wegmans when I'm on the road than at a Walmart.
I miss Wegmans.
Well, Sheets on the road too, at least in the Carolinas, they have
Yeah.
charging for Tesla anyways.
Yeah, Sheets in Pennsylvania has chargers too. Not at every location, but they're out there. So I agree with what's been said. It's just getting easier every day.
And in my neighborhood, every school and every rec center, every government-owned facility has chargers at it. And I'm near 2 schools and a rec center, so there are lots of chargers around.
I do just wish though that we continue to make it a universal for the plug though.
Yes.
That would
yes.
be good.
Yep.
Why not?
That would be a great leap forward.
Yeah, why not?
Yep.
Because Tesla's Tesla.
Yeah, right. Ingrid's got a hand up.
Yeah, I think maybe to expand on Danelle's question, I've heard similar questions and I don't really know the responses, but people have said, what if all of a sudden in the next few years you have many millions of people using EVs? Can the electric grid handle it? So it's not a question of charging infrastructure, it's a question of its utility infrastructure. And I don't know the answer. I mean, I think it's unlikely that we'd have many tens of millions of people buying an EV next year, let's say. But anyway, I'd be curious if any of you have any thoughts on that.
I have one comment to that. I saw a study recently that showed that the amount of energy required to generate and transport a gallon of gasoline, I can't remember what it was, but it was somewhere on the order of like 4 or 5 kilowatt hours, which is just like even the most inefficient EVs like the Hummer.
That's interesting.
are not that like it's way cheaper from an electrical generation perspective to switch over to electric EV than it is to continue to operate gasoline powered cars.
But I think the looking in a bigger scope for your question, Ingrid, if we keep electrifying homes as well as vehicles, there's going to be a bigger draw on the electrical grid. And that's at the root of your question, right? Are we going to have enough generation to power all that electricity?
Right.
Yeah.
And it is also related to, people being worried about government control of their energy source in a way.
As opposed to corporate America, which is doing such a great job.
I know. Yeah. So I mean, those have been some of my responses in terms of like how to like.
My tongue is coming out of my cheek.
I wonder if you've considered, yeah. So anyway, it continues, but that's been most.
Well, everybody on this call has electrical lines going to their house. I personally do not have a gasoline pipeline coming to my house. So the infrastructure for delivering electricity is pretty robust, though it varies a lot. Texas, for example, has some serious problems with its grid. But hopefully we will work to enhance our grid. And the energy system is changing so incredibly rapidly. And most folks don't really have a clue about that. But there are, I believe Oklahoma gets now 40% of its electricity from wind. And, if you had suggested that to somebody 15 years ago, they would have thought you were insane. And we are using less than half the amount of coal we were burning in 2008. We are now getting more. This year, it is likely that the US will generate more electricity from wind than from hydropower. These changes are stunning, really, really stunning. So I'm hopeful that we'll keep on making those good changes. New York State, by the way, has not generated any electricity with coal since the last coal-fired power plant shut down in February of last year, and it had hardly generated anything in the several years before it closed. And that's happening everywhere in the
Is
US.
that just upstate with NIMO, Don? I didn't know that like Long Island and New York City are no longer coal burning.
They are no longer coal burning.
Oh, very interesting.
That's
Yep.
exciting.
Yeah.
The other thing that we
Very
haven't,
exciting, because they've been arguing about wind farms off of Long Island for 20 years.
Mhm.
And they haven't, they finally said they're so far out, your view is not obstructed. Get over yourselves, people.
Yeah, right.
And they're going to put them up, but that's, a decade-long project once they start. But I didn't know we don't burn coal anymore down here.
the other thing that we haven't mentioned is a lot of people out here are putting in the second level of charging plugs in their garages.
Mhm.
And that's costing on the order of $200 to $400, depending on the arrangement that you get.
Right.
So that gives you a direct plug at your home,
Mhm.
and makes it all the more convenient.
Yeah, and like I said, I thought about doing that. There are rebates available to.
Yeah.
I think the cost for me would be about $400, and then I would get a $200 rebate or something like that.
Mhm.
But like I said, I just never go 250 miles 2 days in a row
Right.
from my house, so it just doesn't seem necessary to me.
Yeah.
And Ingrid had a hand up, unless it was a stale hand.
No, that was a stale hand, sorry.
And we've been at it for almost an hour and a half now. I am absolutely fine with staying on for a bit longer, but I don't know if I gave our panelists a warning that it might go as long as this. So I want to give them the opportunity to bow out if they want to.
It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you very much. Everybody does well. Go EV, go Buffalo Bills.
It's my responsibility to say go Broncos.
There you go. There you go. Let me put a couple of
Good to
links
meet you,
in
Nate
chat.
and Ramona.
Yeah, it was great to meet all of
Thanks
you.
to
Yeah,
one and all. It
yeah.
was, it was
Thank
Nice
you
great
very
little
much.
conversation.
Likewise.
to have here, everybody here, and a great session. I am hopeful that folks have found it useful, and the recording is already available on our YouTube channel. I will, which is just priweb.org/YouTube.
Great.
And
Thanks, Don.
thank you. And if you'd like to donate to help have this kind of stuff happen down the line, there's a link in the chat for you. And to see what's coming up, you can click on the second link there.